to try to do in a few minutes was just explain a little bit about my role in the university and a little bit of the work that Rebecca alluded to at the end, how we want to take some of the really good practice from the Global Citizenship program at Ustinov College and some of the ideas that have come largely from this dialogue among students, and see how that can be really a sort of focus for good practice across the university. Now, my role is as Dean for Internationalisation. So Rebecca was being very nice when she was talking about the ability to kind of influence and make big decisions in the university, but you can really only do that if you have a budget. I don't really have a budget as such. I mean, I have some resource to be able to enable staff to travel. We run grant award schemes that we call the Global Engagement Scheme, and staff can apply to that to make partnerships around the world. But when it comes to other aspects of influencing change, that has to be done by face-to-face conversation and contact. It has to be done through developing strategies. It has to be done through making policies actually work. And so we're lucky in that you may have noticed that Durham University has just launched its new 10-year strategy, and within that, embedded within that is an internationalisation strategy. And those really come down to 6 key elements. One is the fact that we're a relatively small town, although it's a city because of its cathedral status, in northern England. We don't have a Premiership football team. We're not on that global, if you like, stage in terms of the sort of public consciousness of exactly where Durham is within the globe. So we rely on, if you like, the reputation of our institution and the reputation, of course, of our students in order to promote ourselves globally. So I'll come back to that point a little bit later. And one of the ways we can try to help promote ourselves is to have strategic partnerships. Now, Rebecca talked about things like the Matariki network, which is 7 universities that join together and work collectively and collegiately on certain academic endeavours. We're also part of a group called the Coimbra Group, which is 39 research-intensive universities throughout Europe, which is something we relatively recently joined, and is quite a good post-Brexit strategy to make sure that, again, we're continuing to reinforce the academic links that we have right across Europe. Now, on the positive side, point 3 about the academic staff. Now, it may or may not appear that we are an internationalised academic faculty, but in fact about 30% of our staff are not British, if you like, homegrown. That's a slightly misleading figure in that some of those are Irish, like me, where you wouldn't probably be able to tell the difference, depending on, and you probably notice I don't actually have an Irish accent either. But what we'd certainly want to do is to be able to make Durham the kind of university that people from around the world would attract the best academics. And then there's the question of the proportion of international students. And last year we had some interesting debates at this conference about international student numbers, and really sort of what was driving that, whether it was financial or whether there were other good academic reasons for having a more international student body. And then 5 and 6 are perhaps where we really want to sort of focus on today, and that is how well do our students, are they welcomed, are they embraced, what is the kind of integration between home international students, both within the kind of academic programs and the curriculum, through to student life and how that plays out in colleges. And of course then what do people take away? The kind of whole question of what is an alumnus, what do they do, how do they advocate for the institution, what do they carry with them in terms of values into their later life. So that's the strategy, and it's very easy to have nice, clear objectives, but what's this really about? So just one a quotation from the president of ETH Zurich, the leading Swiss university. And that's just an interesting reflection that when we were developing the strategy, we looked quite carefully at all sorts of statistics around the way that, you know, what is a university, how have they evolved, where do the universities that are undergoing rapid transition, what sort of behaviours do they exhibit? And this is quite a nice, which it captures a lot in that there really aren't many leading world universities that haven't got a substantial international student body, don't have a substantial number of staff from a wide range of different backgrounds, cultures, nations, and so on. And those universities are pushing their research into all sorts of areas, looking at the big global problems, actually having the right partnerships to be able to address those, be they in health, be they in environment, be they in climate change. So there's a real pattern here that if you're not embracing this idea of outwardly facing, tackling big questions, you're just not going to be a big player. So that's one of the reasons. Now the other thing is people get very excited, if you like, about rankings and league tables and so on, and some of you may have chosen to come to Durham. You may have actually glanced at league tables and thought about the department that I'm going to, where does it rank, the university I'm going to, where does it rank. Now you can get sort of overly concerned about these, but the interesting thing that this map shows, because in my academic subject I'm a geographer, so I do like to have a map in every presentation. I think that's very important. But what this map shows you is the distribution of the top 800 institutions throughout the world. And what's that saying is that the vast majority are actually in Europe and North America, with then an emerging group in Asia. So when we talk about internationalising the faculty, we've got to be careful here, because what we actually really mean is recruiting from other top universities, and that's actually completely a global process. And so you know, bear this in mind a little bit, because when we're looking at things like global reputation surveys and so on, you've got to be able to appeal. You've got to look at your constituency. Europe is really important. North America is very important, and Asia has really grown in importance. And we see a lot of North American universities investing in joint research centres and institutes in Asia, precisely for this idea of trying to see where investment in this part of the world actually then starts to have a mutual benefit in the so-called West, if you like, the Western states. Now the THE are quite interesting. You may not be able to see kind of all of the fine detail here, but what it's really showing is this is your kind of average performance, this white bar, of universities throughout the world. And the top universities, which are Oxford in green, National University of Singapore, and the University of Melbourne in blue, and Caltech in red, all of those kind of institutes sit well above that average in almost any of the metrics you look at. So the senior management of universities look very carefully at these things to see, well, you know, what is it that we should be doing in order for it to move, you know, sort of Durham, if you like, from, let's just say we're somewhere in the average, up there. You know, what sort of things should we be doing? And then another interesting sort of statistic that comes out of the data that you get from some of these tables, if you look at citations as a good indication of kind of general academic performance, you know, that's what when we write things we want people to read. Yeah, that's a given. We want them to have influence. So the field-weighted citation index against, which is on this side, against the collaboration index, which is really looking at the number of partnerships and links that universities have, show a very clear correlation. Now there's scatter in that, of course, but it is again reinforcing the idea that if we're connected, if we're actually publishing, working together, co-publishing, what we'll actually see is mutual benefit. You'll rise in the rankings if you start doing that kind of thing. Now when it comes to Durham, there's a little purple dot there. I apologize if you can't see that. There's a little purple dot there. And these are 200 universities taken from the QS World Ranking data. So that's the Times Higher Education and there's the QS ranking system, two of the most popular. So if we look at citations, again, as an indication of research quality, I suppose, it's the way that research is used. Durham actually is right up there. We're doing really well. Now we know we're doing quite well because other things like the REF, which is of course a national process, says that yes, we're producing a lot of 3- and 4-star publications. We're doing well. The citation data is reinforcing that and showing that compared to our peers, we're doing really well. Whereas in reputation scores, we're actually further down that ranking. And that's because just that people haven't actually heard of us out there. We're not working with enough people around the globe. So a lot of the policies to do with internationalisation are thinking about how we can really address this and how we can take the research quality and get it out to, shall we say, our message out to a broader audience. Now then, when you start looking at other universities and how, for example, the faculty play out, Durham sits here in the middle of a bunch, and this is really showing the number of international staff within universities. So you see, you go from things like National University of Singapore, with a lot of international staff, right through to places like Duke, some of, I mean, things like MIT would actually be an interesting example as well. There are very few actual international staff compared to the total number of academic staff. So, in terms of this graph, Durham is kind of sitting somewhere about the middle. It's not the worst, it's certainly not the best. And then we turn to things like international students. This is a graph that shows the growth of international students since about 2000, right to the present day. Durham, of course, is the purple line, showing pretty steady growth in the number of international students. So again, we're sort of attracting lots of students into Durham, but that growth rate is no different really. It's rather similar to the Russell Group, or if like our peer set of universities throughout the UK. So how does all this relate to things like global citizenship? Well, the interesting thing is that when you look at that student population for Durham, you start to see what the breakdown is. Now this is data from 2015-16, so this is a year or so ago. But it's very interesting when you see where those students come from, and that may, in some sense, it may reflect the population of Ustinov College, for all I know, might well do. When you see the breakdown of postgraduate research and postgraduate taught. But one thing stands out is that there are fewer undergraduate international students. That's a very, 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 very clear thing. And also the diversity, when you start sort of moving down towards the bottom of this table, is also something we want to address. We want a more diverse set. Now, you could carry on with this list and down, and you would actually probably get to about 130 different countries, in fact. So, in one sense, we are diverse, but we could do with being more diverse. And so that is one of the other key aspects of the strategy, is how can we appeal to students throughout the globe? Because if you then do have a more international staff base, a more international student base, then through time you will start to broaden your influence. You will start to create great academics, great researchers who will go out there, will know all about Durham, who will perhaps be still doing co-production of knowledge and creation as they go out into the working world or the academic world. So strategies have to start somewhere, and they have to start to do something positive. Now, looking at student experience, somebody at the dinner last night pointed out that Ustinov College is a great college in terms of international diversity, but some of our other 16 colleges are less so. And the undergraduate body, as you saw in the statistics in the previous slide, is much less internationalized than the postgraduate community. Now, Durham had started a thing called the Durham Award, which was a way of taking some of that integration, if you like, of what happens outside of the academic programs, what happens in the colleges, and making it into a program that would help students think about their skills. And the hope there was it would help a variety of different aspects of employability. Ask them to do a skills audit, identify what they could want to develop, think about what sort of activities they might do in order to develop those skills. Write a reflective piece, so that they could start to think about how they sort of gained those skills and knowledge. And the thing that Rebecca alluded to, the thing that we've been working on, is to try to take that idea of what happens in a college setting and create a more embracing Durham Award that involved a core element of critical thinking and global citizenship, and a series of elective modules which would start to really do what the previous, shall we say, award had been doing, thinking about life skills, career skills, and so on. So the challenge for us is, we've got all these policies, these strategies for how we should engage academically around the world, how we should be more outward looking. But we mustn't forget that as we attract more students, both postgraduate and especially undergraduate, we need to think about them coming into a college community. We need those communities to be, and they're a tremendous opportunity, because colleges, for those of you who don't know Durham, are mixed in terms of the academic programs that we recruit to. So we don't have an entire college of physicists or an entire college of geographers. The subjects are split. So we've got interdisciplinarity within the colleges, and the idea as well is that we'll have a better split between postgraduate and undergraduate as well in the colleges. So they are a great place for students to start thinking about how a global citizenship program might work. Now, Rebecca knows that this process is just really starting now, because the ambition of the university is to offer this to all students. So at the moment, the team, if you like, that are doing the global citizenship in Ustinov, you're a small team, and what you're doing is putting on a great series of events and attracting people openly around the university. But if we wanted to try to scale that up so that every student had the opportunity to start that reflection, what does it mean to be me? What values do I bring? How do I understand other people's values? Intercultural communication. How do I think about global problems and challenges? Well, how do we scale that to our entire student body so that it's something that we could be recognised for? We have a great opportunity in that the groundwork has been, if you like, laid down by some of the good practice in Ustinov College and some of the values that we said came from Sir Peter himself in terms of his outlook on the world and his own views and values, right through to the way in which this is actually practiced at Ustinov College in the sense that you encourage debate and dialogue, and it's about communication and reflection on that. How do we do that? So what I don't want to do, and what I certainly don't want my senior management and my colleagues to do, is to say, this is the skill set that you need. To start imposing these neoliberal values and say, this is what it means to be a citizen. And Tom talked about that last night. He talked about whether this is something that's cultural, whether it's something that's political. And what the Vice-Chancellor wants to do also is to embed that around aspects of critical thinking. What does it mean to start to question? How do you go about doing that? What sort of topics really represent good ways to engage a broad range of intellectual disciplines within this sort of framework? There are a lot of challenges here. It's not easy at all. So what I would quite like to do from an event like this is really take sort of feedback from the discussions we have today and see how it fits in. How would you design a global citizenship module? What do you think should be in there? What things should be avoided? What things should we do? And the kind of typology of global citizenship. I mean, again, Tom talked about the kind of political philosophies around Stoicism and so on, and how that kind of got embedded into some of the ideas of what constituted citizenship within the Roman Empire and so on. But of course, this goes back to the Greek Stoics and the sort of first school of Stoicism of Athens. But there are so many different ways of cutting this, and so many really interesting topics that you could take up. I think the challenge for how to think this through from an undergraduate, especially a first year, is how do they start to navigate around those areas? And can this be done in a way where the college communities and that diversity can actually be the vehicle for embracing change? So, my challenge to you is to give us ideas. This is a great opportunity to sort of feed in to the way in which, if we're caricaturing me as management, should really be thinking about this. What would you like to see? Because it's really only by pushing on those pushing those views forward that they start to actually get embedded in practice. So I hope that by next year we'll have something much more firm to talk about, and by the year after, students will actually be doing this right across the university. Thank you very much.